In this video, we'll look at mixed clusters with Windows and Linux worker nodes. This is something new in Docker Enterprise Edition 1706, and it's a lifesaver if you're developing and deploying hybrid apps where some of the services are Windows-based and some are Linux. It's also great if you're using Linux on IBM Z series, because you can now run your workers on there too. So here we are in the Docker EE web UI, and we're looking at the nodes in our cluster. Now, if we order by OS here, we can see that all three of the manager nodes are Linux. And that's a requirement right now. Managers still need to be Linux. But the workers, like where the action happens and where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, for our applications, these can be Linux and Windows in the same cluster. I mean, we can see that we've got two Windows nodes right here. Now, the little icon and the OS label tell us right away that Docker knows that these are Windows. But if we click on one of them, and if we drill into Engine, we can see here that it's nicely labelled up under Platform. Great. What all this means is that we can deploy Windows and Linux apps side by side right in this cluster. Speaking of which, let's do it. So Docker EE supports Docker Stacks. And let me resize this. Okay, we'll call it Hybrid App. It's service-based, and this is what it looks like. Oh, resize again. Alright, so a couple of services. Database and App Server. Database up here, this is a Windows service, so it needs to run on Windows workers. Well, App Server down here, this is Linux, so it needs Linux. And the way that we make this happen is through placement constraints like this here. So this one here is obviously only going to be scheduled on Windows workers, whereas this one, Linux workers. And this is all we have to do, because every time a new worker gets added to the cluster, it automatically gets labelled up as Windows or Linux. That bit's already done. We just leverage that label here when we're deploying our apps. So let's deploy it. Now I'm going to pause the video for a bit here while the nodes go away and pull the images and get things started. Okay, the stack's all deployed, and if we look over here at services, both are up and showing as green. Now then, we said the database service here was Windows based, and if we come all the way down here to constraints, we can see, yeah, constrained to Windows nodes. But if we come all the way back up here to the top and inspect the resource, which essentially places a filter on the UI, and we'll hit containers here so that we only see containers that are part of this service. And we can see that sure enough, it's deployed on worker 3, which I happen to know is a Windows node. But if we kill the filter up here and swing over to nodes, sure enough, worker 3 is a Windows node. And I suppose we should check that the Linux web front end also got deployed on a Linux node. So we'll inspect or put a filter on that. And there it is, Manager 2. And we know that manager nodes are always Linux, so great. And that's that. Mixed Windows and Linux clusters, including Linux on IBM Z series, with the ability to deploy any mix of Windows and Linux-based apps. For more information, come and visit us at www.docker.com/enterprise edition.